Welcome, my friend, to another episode of the Chasing Poker Greatness podcast. As always, this is your host, the founder of ChasingPokerGreatness.com, Coach Brad Wilson. Today is Friday, which means it's a philosophical day. Duncan, welcome
Hello,
to
good
the
sir.
show. Yeah,
Yeah.
hello. I'm thinking that we have a topic that's ripe for discussion.
It's just that we're like, we're not late at all in this topic. Not at
Well,
all.
yeah, to be fair, I've already released one podcast episode on this specific topic,
That's right.
but I don't know your thoughts on it.
Mm-hmm.
And from our conversation before we fired up the recording, it did sound like you have some different opinions than the ones expressed by both me and Jay in that earlier episode. And there are some things too that I realized after we recorded that I think could also be mentioned in today's conversation as well. So yes, dear listener, you are about to get another episode of Garret and Robbi in its most recent iteration. I guess the breaking news today is that Garret apparently donated the money to, or donated $135,000 to charity. And he did not specify whether or not like that means that, if they don't find any cheating or any malfeasance, that he's going to give the money back. There's no like specific thing that was stated as it relates to that money, but that was just the thing that happened today.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I'll let you set the stage as to where the discussion's going to go.
Absolutely. And just since you mentioned that, we should probably also preface the fact that, it's one thing what Garret should do in that situation, and it's another thing what he should do publicly, what he should do behind the scenes. So there's like all sorts of different levels to talk about in a move like this, right? But we will get to that. One thing that I want to say first and foremost, everything that we're going to say is an opinion, right? Any statement is conjectural, and no matter what we say for the duration is going to be superseded by this very statement. And I want to mention that because, again, freedom of speech is the most important thing. So we're going to be free to speak our minds here. So no matter what we say later on, no matter how convinced we sound about anything, everything should be superseded by the disclaimer that I just made right now.
Yeah, and to set the record straight, I'm not ultra convinced on anything.
Right.
So like my opinion is still that like, who knows? Exactly. I'm not sure. I just have looked at the evidence and thought about it. And so I have an opinion, but it's not like locked in stone. It's not totally something that couldn't change based on additional information coming forward.
Absolutely. And we can talk about a lot of different things, and also to add to what you just said, I think it doesn't make much sense to make any statements or take any sides on innocent or guilt for basically a few reasons. There is not enough concrete evidence to take a specific side. Also, nothing good can come out of it, like just by telling that somebody is guilty or innocent on partial evidence. It doesn't help the conversation move forward. It's better to talk about the evidence itself, and we're going to have some hot takes on the evidence for sure. Like, instead of just making conclusions, let people make those conclusions. And I would say the same thing also for people like Joy, for example, Joy Ingram, who's, shout out to Joy, like, incredible investigation. There's no point asking Joy what is his probability, like on that type of stuff. Like, I mean, there's no point in trying to affect, people's opinion on the conclusions themselves. Just talk about the facts.
Well, I think there is a point to asking Joey's opinion, because he's probably been in this more than anybody else. So if there's somebody that does have any kind of qualified opinion, he probably has the most qualified at this stage in the game. But yeah, like I'm comfortable having an opinion or stating my own probabilities personally, like, because they're just my opinions.
Absolutely. But I just want to say, like, that I do disagree, however, like with that even though Joy indeed is the most qualified person to talk about it, still, making the conclusion from the assumptions is something that he may not be qualified to do that.
Sure.
Like, just having access to all the evidence is a different thing than actually evaluating that evidence. And I think
but it's probably going to be more accurate than Bob from Twitter's take.
Possibly, yes, but there is also the fact that it's dangerous for people who are going to try to outsource this kind of idea. Like we're getting into that issue of the of the influencers that we were talking about.
Sure.
Right. So that's the same sort of issue. But anyway, to its own. And by the way, that brings me to, like, I just want to, let's start with that. Give me your hottest take of that situation. What would you consider to be the hottest take that you have on the situation? Let's start there.
The hottest take on the situation. I think the hottest take on the situation is, like, I feel as if the poker world has somehow, like, rewound itself. Like, a year ago, everybody was trashing people for conspiracy theories. Right. And then this past week, everybody's lost their damn minds. Right. And it just appears to me as if it's going to something bordering on like weekly world news type of information, with all the streams and the hot takes and everything. Like, I just think it's kind of devolved into like parody at this point, right, where it's like, oh, there was something in her pocket. Wow, that's probably what she used to cheat, because yeah, of course, somebody that's cheating is going to put something in their pocket that vibrates the whole poker table. Oh, her, Rip is probably cheating with her and feeding her information, because let's add a chain in this cheating mechanism where Rip just doesn't cheat himself for some unknown reason. He wants her to cheat instead. Like, like I said, my hottest take is that, like, all of the content out right now is just kind of, to me, bordering on parody level of like, this is obscene. And to me, it's they're like really intelligent people who I respect, who are falling into this trap, which for the folks that like yelled at anti-vaxxers and had all these things to say about conspiracy theorists, there are people that are falling into this exact trap right now, and who are convinced that something, they can make sense of the soup. And that to me that's entertaining, interesting. But yeah, I guess maybe that's my hottest take.
Oh, that's great. And they're convinced that either, like, some people are convinced that something either happened or didn't happen. That's equally the same problem. And like I said, like many intelligent people, they're jumping to conclusions either way, which is why in a situation like this, I think conclusions are dangerous. At least, promoting conclusions. It's okay to promote arguments. It's okay to discuss those arguments, but promoting conclusions, especially from a place of, some sort of power and influence, it is very dangerous, because people may be outsourcing. And it's the similar thing that I've said multiple times before. It is damaging to society for people who are not experts to specific topics to make conclusions on really tough subjects, like, for instance, the pandemic and things like that. It's okay to go and discuss things. And I'm not saying that we should be censoring anybody, by the way. What I'm saying is that people should be responsible enough to know that if they have a platform to say things, they should curb their enthusiasm a little bit, and they should be, talking about the assumptions, and leave the conclusions to the listeners.
Here's another hot take. I think that accusing somebody of cheating should be done with thought and not done in the moment publicly. And I think that Garret was wrong.
Let's talk about that. I love that. This is great.
I just think straight up that Garret has handled the situation thus far not good.
So let's start with that question, because I also have some thoughts, which, again, it's funny because this podcast, it feels to me that it's going to tie up so many conversations we had in the past about responsibility, about metahumility, about influencers, about outsourcing. Like, we're going to hear a lot of these thoughts. I love it. What would you do in about freedom of speech? This is very relevant into this conversation. What would you do if you're G-Man in his spot? And I'll tell you what I would do also.
So, in G-Man's spot, I mean, so I think the first thing that he did, so I would say that, like, I don't think that he was wrong until the moment where he posted all of his thoughts on a Twitter, because that required reflection and thought. And I thought a lot of the things that he posted were things that nobody can know, that he's convinced of. Like, he's 100% clearly got cheated, obvious, like using these statements of certainty that are not merited in this, because nobody knows. And he certainly isn't gonna know, but he's falling into the trap of he's closest to the situation and it feels certain, and therefore it just is to him in his mind. So like, I think, I mean, even his statement of saying that like he didn't ask for the money back, and then Feldman said, well, we have like Robbi's account of the situation is more accurate than yours, right? And that to me is like, he's emotionally compromised. He's angry. So he's not operating from a space of level-headedness, calm. It's all the things that you see everybody else act at the poker table around Garret. And this, we kind of see him crack, for lack of a better word. His whole, like everything just kind of cracked, and he lost it. And so I think like that being certain about the situation, I think is a mistake. I think that taking the money when she offered the money is actually reasonable. However, what I would do if I were Garret would be to put the money in escrow and have a neutral third party investigate the situation and come up with some kind of opinion, and then just stick with that opinion. If the third party investigation says, I don't think, it's a 95% chance that she didn't cheat, then he gives the money back. I mein, to me, it's just that simple.
And to be fair, we all had time to reflect and think about it, how would react in that situation. Time works in our favor for us, like because we can think how we would act in an ideal world. How do you think you would really act in the moment? Like if you're being honest, you would act. Yes, if you thought, because it's important in the assumption, we assume that you think you were cheated. That's what goes through your mind. That we have to be in his shoes.
I would think the same.
Right. And how would you act in the moment? What do you think?
One second. One second.
We're doing live. So things are happening live, ladies and gentlemen. You're still muted, by the way, Brad. Oh, he knows. Okay. So, while Brad is figuring out the thing, what I wanna say after he comes back with us, that I would also like to consider what Brad would do in Robbi's shoes. Again, I want to also mention my take on this, because I think it's interesting here, but some of the ideas, especially of the free speech that we've been talking about, shows us that the actions of two different parties, they don't necessarily have to be consistent with one another. So what we would do as G-Men and what we would do as Robbi can be very much at odds, even though if we are the same person. So that's what one of the things that I found by thinking about this long and hard. If I thought a lot that if I was in G-Man's shoes, I think that I would definitely, one way or another, I don't know exactly what the form would be, I would apply maximum pressure. Like one of the things that you will know about, dealing with someone like me is that, I'm the nicest person at the poker table, but if I think at any point you cross me, you probably, you're going to regret that you crossed this person versus somebody else. And I would apply so much pressure. Like I would consider potentially stopping the game, like on the things. And if I'm Robbi at the same time, this is where it's going to sound like a paradox. And this is why I think that freedom of speech is so important. If I'm Robbi, I say to G-Man immediately, okay, I understand.
Search me.
No. Are you kidding me? I'm going to say one more word about cheating and I'm going to sue you. Like, so the point is, the point that I'm trying to make is that we have freedoms and sometimes these freedoms clash. So it is our responsibility and our responsibility alone to protect ourselves. So basically what I'm suggesting is that G-Man should apply maximum pressure and Robbi should push back.
Well, he did, right?
And Robbi should push back. Yes.
He did apply maximum pressure. He went and talked to the producers. Absolutely. And it was not a calm conversation that Robbi was a part of. And the result of that was that she offered him the money back. So I would say that like Garret most likely applied maximum pressure and got the result that is favorable to him.
Right. And there's one thing, sorry to interrupt you, but there's one thing that I think G-Man made a mistake of. And this is, again, I really want to talk closer to as factually as possible. And his mistake was that he talked in absolute terms. There's no such thing, I'm 100%. He was 100% in his statement that, Robbi cheated. He was 100% that Hustle Casino Live was not involved. You cannot say those things. And incidentally, this is where meta-humility really applies to that situation. I think what happened to Garret was something like that. I cannot possibly fight Robbi if I'm not 100% sure. I cannot possibly apply maximum pressure without having a smoking gun. This is basically a contrast between his confidence and humility. So he's thinking to himself, listen, in order for me to be confident, 100% confident, I need to absolutely reduce any chance of doubt. But in actuality, that doubt lives at a higher level. So that doubt is always there. So it's okay to have doubt. It's okay to have a lot of doubt and still have ultra confidence. That's why we need the meta in meta-humility. That doubt needs to live at a higher level, and it's okay. He could have said, listen, guys, I have no idea if she cheated or not. It's irrelevant. I applied maximum pressure because I'm protecting myself. And she gave me the money back. So get off my back. She gave me the money. It's her decision. I don't know if she cheated. I don't care if she cheated, frankly. I thought she might have cheated. So I applied maximum pressure and it worked out. That's where, confidence operates at a lower level, right? And I think that somehow, because he couldn't put the meta in meta-humility, he thought that the doubt had to completely be eliminated. He said, the only way I can act as confident as I am is if I eliminate the doubt. But we act on impartial information all the time. Does what I'm saying make sense?
It does.
This is, I think, a big mistake on Garrett's perspective. He should have defended his position on partial evidence, and he didn't do anything wrong by applying pressure. It's Robbi's responsibility to defend herself. It is not Garrett's responsibility to defend Robbi. Of course, there's specific ways that we can do it in human ways. You don't want to obviously assault anybody. You don't want to know. But when it comes to the freedom of speech, we should be able of saying whatever we want up to a point where we don't intrude somebody else's personal space, in which case it's now their responsibility to kick us the heck out, right? That's what I'm saying. It was important also for Robbi to push back, push the guy away. Don't listen to that nonsense. You're innocent, right? Assuming she's innocent, right? I'm not saying she is or she isn't, but push the guy away. Don't let him get into your space.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure. I think that the perspective is quite different from one player to the next, and that Garret has a lot of experience in this arena and a lot of clout, and she doesn't, quite frankly. And so she's inexperienced, uncertain of herself, uncertain of the situation. And so I think that for someone who's in a high stress environment, I don't exactly know. It's hard for people to stand up for themselves in these types of situations. In my life, I know there's lots of times where I've been in a high pressure environment and haven't pushed back and haven't stood up for myself, and only realized afterwards that, my emotions were flaring and got the better of me, and I just didn't respond in the way that I would have liked to have in a perfect world.
Oh, me too. But whose responsibility is it? That's the question that I'm asking.
Sure, it's her responsibility. But
there you go.
So to go back, how would I handle this type of situation if it happened to me on a live stream? I would. So I don't know. The first answer, the most honest answer, is I don't know how I would respond, because again, it would be high emotion, and I have no idea. Given the benefit of the way this situation has gone down, though, what I've learned is that there are things that you can have access to in the moment that you don't have access to later on. So I would express my position and opinion and my fear to the producers, and I would ask if I would express my fear to Robbi too, and to the whole table. Yo, I think something's weird here. That was not right. Something is off. How do we resolve this right now in this moment before
the game,
before things spiral out of control? The way to address it now would be and again, Robbi would have to agree, or they would have to agree of emptying your pockets,
Right.
like taking off your jewelry, like just everybody just being transparent about what. And by the way, can I just say that, there have been some things said about Hustler Casino Live, like not wanding people down, because that's like not their style, etc. And I would just like, is the purpose to have a clean game or to not have a clean game?
Right.
Are we like we're living by the honor system? That to me is like unbelievable to me, really, from like a security standpoint of like, wait, so the players are like not cool with ensuring that nobody has an electronic device on them? I would be totally cool with that. Sure. Wand me down. I don't care. Like, go for it. Right. Like, I don't have anything to hide. That part of it seems like really bizarre security hold to me.
Just a little bit of devil's advocate on this. And I would agree with you 100%, by the way. Like, again, typically speaking, if you have nothing to hide, you wouldn't mind. Although, to be fair, like, it's within your rights to say, screw you, I don't want to do that. Like, I don't want to empty my pockets.
Yeah, then don't play on the stream.
Yeah, exactly.
You think there's people that aren't waiting around to play on the stream? Like, there's a wait list, I'm sure, 1,000 people long of people to take your seat. So don't take the seat.
So the devil's advocate here is that the rights, like the human rights that we have as human beings, and then including like the things like the freedom of speech and, like having personal space. I think, even though, again, people, it's not a big deal. Like you said, I mean, practically speaking, it's not a big deal to let somebody invade your space temporarily so that they can put a wand, whatever. I understand practical, but philosophically, and it's a good thing that people are pushing back on rights, because those rights are what has made this country so beautiful, right? But
it's a privilege to play on a poker stream. Not a right.
And this is why I agree with you, right? I mean, this is why I'm saying this is just like I'm playing a little bit of devil's advocate.
Sure.
Right?
No, I understand. Yeah, I got to go through 30 minutes of security every time I fly to Idaho, and I don't even want to be to Idaho. Like, so taking 3 seconds of extra security to get to play in a juicy live stream. Right. Okay. Like, I mean, I don't know, but that was another thing that struck me as like kind of weird that came out after this, of like, no, we're not like we're just like asking people for their phones. And like, so if somebody carries on 2 phones, that's okay. Like, people can just bring on whatever the hell they want. And like, okay. But going back to the original question that we've circled around like 20 times, I would stop the game, or I would stop the game to get to the bottom of it then. Agree. And if she didn't want to do it, or anybody at the table didn't want to resolve the situation immediately, then I would leave the game. Absolutely. And then I would just try to figure out what the next move was. That would be how I would go about it.
And if you're Robbi, and then the person is, sitting there and accusing you, and you've done nothing wrong, what do you do?
Search because me. I think I don't care. I'll throw away all my rights. Like, you can check everything that I have, check for buzzers, check for, you can do a freaking full scan of my body, whatever. Like, it doesn't matter to me. Like, I've got. If I have nothing to hide, I have nothing to hide, and I don't care. Like, I would like the situation to be resolved. That's personally what I would do. And then if I misread my hand or called and won with Jack high or whatever it was, then I would say, but that's my fucking money. That's my pot. Like, so you're not going to find anything, and this is my money. And please, you don't insult me by thinking that I'm going to return it to you.
Oh, absolutely. I agree with that too. And I agree for the most part, up to, giving up the rights. Of course, again, it depends on the situation. I'm very sensitive when it comes to rights, and in particular to the freedom of speech, so I think that would be the only difference. But for the most part, I agree, like, it's if it's non-invasive, and if it's something very simple, let's get on with it. But you utter one more word, an insinuation, and all hell is going to break loose, right? Because, again, back off. You're getting into my space. And similarly, like, G-Mans thought that she was getting into his space. So here we have a clear conflict. And I think that's why it's so interesting, because all the things that we discussed here in Philosophical Friday, they showed up. Here we have a clear conflict of interest where 2 people are getting into the other person's space. And it is very important to have the tools to know how to navigate that. And I think it is incredibly important, not just in the poker world, but at any aspect of life, to be protective of your own space. Nobody else is going to do that for you, right? And I think it's very, 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 very important. You have the full responsibility. Don't expect somebody else to have, like people are saying, oh, you know what this is going to do to her reputation. Shit happens, people. Like, life is like that all the time, and we take specific actions. We have to take the full responsibility of them. You call with Jack high, whether intentional or unintentional, that can happen. You gotta be able to defend yourself from that point onwards. And I know I sound, I don't mean to sound harsh. I've been in spots like this where
I hate that take, by the way. I'm very much disagree.
No, I mean, I've been in uncomfortable situations many times in my life in disadvantages that have nothing to do with cheating. And like, people have the upper hand because they're in more familiar environments, but I put myself in that environment. It's my responsibility. Like, I cannot expect somebody else. And this is consistent with everything I've been saying so far, by the way. It's not like I changed my opinion on the subject, but I think we are being very condescending in trying to protect other people and saying that, and actually, I think that, speaking of condescension, I think there's been a great amount of condescension around Robbi, like, because in order to do something like that, it's sort of like, is getting a little bit polarized. It either is a very weak poker player. We're talking about probably one of the weakest poker players that ever stepped foot on Hustler Casino Live, or she's cheated. And a lot of people,
or she misread her hand, and you've discounted that, so you don't use it as an option. And I think I personally think that's the most likely option of all the options.
We haven't talked about this. Yes, we talked a little bit about that off stream. Yes, I do not think that's one of the things that surprises me the most. There's a lot of things which are gray here. Like, I don't think there is like a legitimate chance she misread her hand. Like,
how come?
Because first of all, when you're being involved in a hand, and you have a lot of time to read at your hand, which she looks at her hand just before she calls the all-in. That gives you a lot of time to think about it. And also, you can see that the two cards, she's not looking at one card, she's actually looking at two cards. You can see there's a huge separation between these two cards. That's number one. Number two,
let's talk about number one.
Yeah.
Have you ever misread a board?
Well, I've done all sorts of mistakes. Like, yes, absolutely.
And the board is like out there always, right? And there are many clips on YouTube of players misreading a board. I found multiple clips of Phil Ivey misreading his hand, misreading a board. He was playing stud 8 or better in a tournament, made a low, looked at his cards and mucked his hand.
He made a flush once on a final table, and then
right. So to me, like, there's no, just again, from my perspective, there are plenty of times in life where I'm staring at something and yet I'm not seeing anything. My head is just in a different place where I'm not like 100%. Visually comprehending what I'm looking at or thinking about. So, that's my take. And the looking at the cards, I think, before calling, I can't explain it other than mistakes happen. And I think in high stress environments, people do very weird, unpredictable things.
And I agree with that 100%. And I would say that in a vacuum, the priors, if we want to get a little bit of a Bayesian here, the priors, like in a vacuum, with no any assumptions made, it's so much easier for somebody to misread their hand rather than cheating. But here's the problem. Here's how many stars need to align, because this is only one out of many things that happen that in that situation. So not only she looks at her hand, right? She decides to say call, and after she calls, she's being asked twice. She's being asked twice. Do you have pocket threes? No. Do you have a 3 in your hand? No. She responds twice to those two things.
Nobody said, do you have a 3 in your hand?
There is in the back of the. You can hear it in the video. Yes. So
I actually have the audio clip blown up from the stream by my audio guy. Maybe I can play the clip.
We can go back to that, but this is just one of it.
Well, it's important. It's an important thing when.
Sure. Let me just finish all of them though. Because
go finish all the things. Go ahead. Go for it.
Do you have a pocket pair? No. So do you have a small pair? No. Then she looks at the board and she turns over her hand. She doesn't say, like, you see no reaction whatsoever. That exactly what I thought I had is exactly the thing that I have. I have, like, do you have a pair? You give me that much credit. Like, everything about her demeanor at all times is consistent with the hand that she actually has. If somebody has a pocket pair there, or a pair in general, that doesn't have to be a pocket pair, you don't need to be embarrassed about anything. You thought the guy was bluffing. You have a pair. There's nothing to be embarrassed. You actually got the guy, right? I mean, you should be.
But isn't that presumptuous and sort of projecting how somebody should feel in that situation?
Oh, yeah, of course. Of course. But the point that I'm saying is that all of these things accumulate, right? I'm not saying that each one of them is indicative, but you get that story there. Like, we make decisions, we make decisions on a, like, if we make conclusions on much less information and we have far more confidence on a daily basis at the poker table than if this was in a court of law, like, everybody would say that she was lying there. Like, we have all the evidence suggesting. I'm not saying that there is not a story. I'm not saying that there's not a story that would actually explain it, but sometimes if it walks like a duck, moves like a duck, sounds like a duck, we call it a duck and we move on. That's essentially my point. So
that's mine too, is I think that everything walks, talks like a duck and falls in the camp that she misread her hand based on the evidence.
Only if you're trying to prove that she's innocent, right?
I mean, I'm just looking at the thing objectively. And looking at the data points, right? I don't know one way or the other for sure, but I would say that misreading hand to me is the most likely conclusion based on watching all of her previous streams, mapping everything out. There was a time where she called, I believe she called an all-in at some point on another stream, and she was embarrassed to turn her hand over when she did have a small pair and she called. Right. So that was fairly consistent with her not wanting to turn her hand over. One thing that I thought about after I made the episode. So the first thing is, when Garret asked if she had a pocket pair, she said, "You give me that much credit," which could mean multiple things, right? It could mean that her hand that she thinks she has, a 3, is worse than a pocket pair in between the 3 and the 9. The first board runs out double paired when they run it twice. And this I thought about after the fact. She said that, like, they were talking about who was going to win the board, win that board. And she said something like, Garret said, "That one's yours." And she's like, "No, I think you won that one." Right. And then if you think about it in the context that she thought she had a pair, then the board double pairing would counterfeit her pair and she would have jack high. Mm-hmm. The only way that her hand gets demoted by the board double pairing is if you think you have a pair. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, your hand is relatively the same strength no matter what. Mm-hmm. And to be fair, I watched every other stream that she played on, and just in that one stream, the case against cheating, I found 3 or 4 spots where she just folded the best hand on the flop, and there was like 20 or 30K in the pot, or the turn, or the river. Plenty of spots where she made bad calls, bad value bets, just all over the place. I found 15 examples in the past 3 videos. Even in that stream, she got it in with kings pre and lost to like ace something. I can't remember what it was, but it was a pretty big pot. There was a thing that Garret insinuated in his statement that for this stream, she bought in for 10x more than the other streams. She bought in for 30K in the 2 other streams she played on. And that stream was 100K minimum buy-in. And she bought in for 100K, the minimum. So like there were like these exaggerations that I saw that were just inconsistent from like what I'm looking at. So like, to me, it boils down to like either they decided to cheat.
So you're talking about cheating, right? Just to clarify, right?
Yeah. So like the whole situation to me is like they selectively cheated in one hand that was exceptionally absurd, passed up many other opportunities to cheat on every stream that she played on. Mm-hmm. That was much more legitimate situations. consistently made actions that, indicated no cheating, value betting incorrectly, calling rivers incorrectly, not bluffing when she's losing, like just like there was nothing to suggest that anything was going on in any other stream except this one hand that's an outlier.
You see, that's where I agree with you, actually, and I think this is a different discussion, right? And I think that's very important. Talking about cheating is completely different than talking about her misreading her hand. I think the two conversations are fairly independent, at least when it comes to making conclusions, because I think it's very difficult, to make the conclusion that she cheated. I have this theory of potentially like soft cheating. For example, soft cheating would be she saw Garrett's cards, let's say this one hand, and she didn't know what to do with that information. She acted weird. There's all sorts of different theories that could have happened, right? But the point is, to me, that's completely a different conversation than like face value. You're looking at somebody, you have years of experience at the poker table, they're acting in a specific way, they flip over the hand, they don't even flinch, like nothing changes in their demeanor, and then they don't say anything. I thought I had a 3, and then all of a sudden their story completely changes, and to me
she said, can you beat a 3? But before she decided to call, she said, can you beat a 3?
Because she was, what does that have to do with anything? I mean, she would say she was trying to get a read.
So, I mean, Garrett's already all in at that point, right?
Right, because she's trying to see at that point if he has more than a pair, or if he's just like an ace high or something. Like he's trying to see if he's like on a pure draw or that. I mean, to me that makes perfect sense why somebody would ask that. Like he's trying to put him on a specific. He's trying to put him on a cutoff in his range, like, because if you cannot beat a 3, that means you have like the best you have is not no pair, which is consistent with what you said earlier. I thought the best you have is an ace high. So she's asking literally,
like, that's the thing. I thought you had ace high, and she has a hand that doesn't beat ace high. Well,
right?
That's another part too of misreading hand. Yeah,
you understand what I'm saying, though, right? It's a different conversation, right?
I'm saying these are all the data points that make me believe she misread her hand. I thought he had ace high. Well, so he says, so you called with jack high, right? So like, I mean, if you misread your hand and you think you have a pair, then you would call and then you would say exactly those words. I thought you had ace high. I thought you had a flush draw or something.
She quote unquote explained that, by the way, in Joy, like when she went to Joy, she basically came down. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I didn't need. So like most of my opinions come from looking at it, thinking about it. And I know that's what she said. She said on the Hustler stream as well, I think later on in that stream afterwards, that she misread her hand. But just her behavior, everything to me just lines up with like, she thought she had a pair and she didn't have a pair. Right. And then the world exploded.
And I think, that also could be underestimating, like her intelligence a little bit. And like, to me, that theory doesn't like, I have no idea what happened with respect to cheating, but to me, it's like something like,
how does it underestimate her intelligence?
Because like it basically, it shows a person who is so lost in that situation. They're so confused with what happened. They're so confused to the point that, they didn't think they should mention that, hey, you know what, I thought I had a pair, get off my back or whatever, until much later. They have this like language, this body language, which incidentally I also asked Twitter what they thought if she misread her hand or not. We can talk about some of these Twitter questions later. But and all of a sudden, she flip-flops, and then she says, I had a 3. So basically we're thinking that this is just the person who's not exactly 100% up there, right? I mean, she's like a little bit, you
mean fuzzy, somebody who like, says things different than the truth of what happened at a poker table? This is like an anomaly. People don't exactly always tell the truth about what they're thinking when they make their decisions at when they're sitting down at the poker table. Like 100% truth is necessary. To me, like assuming that she called with jack high, knowing she called with jack high, is even more insulting to intelligence. Like that's even more underestimating someone.
That again, that is a possibility, and you know why, you know, if she's actually lying there, that could actually mean that if she's indeed intelligent and she did call with Jack high, maybe that's evidence of cheating potentially. So that's something that we have to explore. But I do think there is a huge level of condescension, you know, like on the way she's thinking about, like, let me give you an example of what I mean by condescension. So a lot of people are talking about the idea of the word salad. For me, when somebody is using the concept of blockers correct on the flop, but completely incorrect and irrelevant on the turn, to me, that feels more like a red herring and a distraction, not necessarily somebody who doesn't have understanding of the game, right? So when you're telling the story and you say, okay, why would you call there with Jack high? But let me tell you on the flop. Nobody's asking you about the flop. And what you're saying about the flop makes sense. You have the Jack of clubs, you have a backdoor flush, you have a backdoor straight. That makes perfect sense on the flop. Nobody asked you about that. Why did you call the all-in? But let me tell you about the flop. I have the Jack of clubs. I have, you know. So my point is that this whole conversation feels more like a distraction to me than it feels like somebody who is, so again, somebody who understands what's going on with blockers on the flop, but somehow they lose complete understanding of the game on the turn somehow. So that's, again, I'm having a little bit of trouble here.
Well, I don't think having a blocker on the flop is good anyway. Like you probably don't want to have the Jack of clubs in this situation. You would rather,
but you see what I'm saying.
You would rather Garrett have it. So
I
the use of blockers to me doesn't make sense on the flop or the turn.
It is correctly used, though. What I'm saying, like I'm not saying it's the correct strategy, but it is correctly used. So she's basically saying yes. So she's basically saying that. And actually, I said blocker, but I meant she was basically backdoors. You know, her story is like so weird to follow that, you know, us talking about it, you know, we're losing IQ points poker wise. But what I was trying to say though, like her analysis, like the fact that, you know, she wanted to call the flop because of the backdoor possibilities, makes sense. You know, so the call on the flop makes sense. It's something that, you know, we can stand behind. But then on the turn, you know, all bets are off. And her explanation to Joy, which, you know, Joy apparently finds that, you know, convincing, is that I thought on the turn that worst case scenario he has ace high, so I was like, you know, screw it, and then that was the famous I played the man.
Yeah, so I'm not ultra interested in the verbalizations after the hand.
Me neither, to be honest.
Indefinitely, because I think that they're just a lot of noise. And it's hard to discern anything,
right?
Because who knows? Like what I prioritize the most is what happened right before the hand, what she verbalized, and then the information of how she played on all the previous streams, and if it was in alignment with that hand. The only thing that's out of alignment in that hand would be her calling with Jack high. I think calling with a pair would have been aligned in completely in alignment with every single other hand that I watched on every single other stream.
Right.
The thing that is bizarre is that it is Jack high. Now, again, maybe she just called with Jack high. I don't know. I give that a smaller percent likelihood. But yeah, my 3 buckets would be misread hand, call with Jack high, then cheating, probably in that order. But small likelihood of the first 2, big likelihood for the final one for me. Can we play this? Let's play this clip for the podcast listener.
Sure. Yes.
It's only 3 minutes long.
Yeah, please.
So may
it's
as well.
Not like they haven't seen it before. So
yeah, may as well. We cleaned it up some. So
yes.
Plus, I made my podcast guy go through all the trouble of making it. May as well.
She said that she thought Garrett had a draw about 20 minutes ago, and Garrett had the full house, the queen 4 against Jack 8, and she took some time with it, and then she said,
I just want to call to see it. I think he might have me though. 3's no good? This is why you shouldn't be in hands like this.
She doesn't have a 3. So.
You want me to call you?
I don't know what she is thinking about here because she loses to some bluffs like king, queen, jack types of things too.
I call.
She calls?
Twice.
For once, but it's up to you. Yikes.
Oh my god.
Let's see your hands. So far, so good. It looks like you're ahead.
Look at his king.
What is going on
For
here?
once, but it's up to you.
Oh yeah.
Is it possible that her hand might be misread in the card graphics or something?
Because I have a shitty hand.
You do? Yikes.
Got it.
Great.
Done. Okay.
You have pocket 3?
What?
No. No, I just thought he's. This is a pure bluff.
You heard that?
out
When
there.
he said he had a 3 and said no?
With jack high?
Yeah, but that's like
No, I just thought he's.
like who
no-
knows who knows which question she's even answering at that point.
But I mean, at that point, what I'm saying is that, you know, she's like very negative on this poker business. She's like very dismissive. And that's why I'm saying like a lot of it is her face too. Like, you know, if somebody's listening just to the audio, it doesn't convey the whole message. You look at her, she's like so convinced she doesn't have a pair. She's like, no, you give me that much. Like, I'm really surprised that poker players are even talk about that. Like, the joke that I like, you think you guys would survive if we buy that nonsense, like at the poker table. But to be fair, it would explain a lot, because again, that wouldn't be a good cheating. So it would explain a lot. So I could understand why people would think that she misread her hand. But like viscerally, independent whether we think she cheated or not, believing that to me makes like close to 0 sense.
Yeah, I mean that's Phil Ivey's opinion too.
Yeah.
When he was asked, and
Right.
So I mean,
This is a pure bluff catcher. I'm doing.
With jack high?
But yeah, I don't have. I think he has me beat.
Well, go to the river. The river is a 9.
It's not fucking quiet. That one's you for sure.
They're gonna run it
You have, like, pocket
twice,
5
and
or something.
So.
she's
You have,
gonna.
like, small pair?
Yeah, she's a 3 and a king.
You give me
By
that
the
much
way,
credit?
sorry to interrupt,
know,
on the 9, if that's another thing which it's subtle. When she sees the 9 and she anyway, what was I was about to say, like, you know, that that I don't think so is like, you know, how do you not think so exactly? You know, you just like if you call with that pair, you get counterfeited. So what exactly do you beat at that point if you really had that pair? You know what I mean? But again,
you beat the
it's
nut
not-
flush draw. You beat king queen of clubs
no,
that you now lose to.
after you saw the 9, right? Because he says that's you, and she says I don't think so. So what do you think you beat exactly at this point, right? So you think like your pair got counterfeited, right?
Sure.
So what do you beat?
You don't beat anything. You beat
Right.
7-8 of clubs.
Right. So you know, at that point, you're not like, you know, it's just it just doesn't feel right. You know, I like that. I don't think so. Like if you saw you got counterfeited at that point, you say something along the lines of, you know, no way now, or something like that. Like not I don't think so.
That's substantially different than I don't think so. I mean, that seems like we're kind of
So you
picking
s-
hairs at semantics here.
Right, but I mean, like I'm saying, like that's the impression that I'm getting when we say I don't think so. What is it exactly that you're saying, that there might be a chance you're actually ahead? You only think there might be a chance that and anyway, just
She's good with the first one.
Let's turn him over. You're not that.
Oh.
Yeah.
No. Jesus.
If the cards are correct.
Already there.
What is it called?
What a street call.
And the river breaks out again.
Oh my god. Oh my god.
Wow.
I want to see. Does she have Jack 4?
She got 4.
Jack high?
What?
Whoa!
Look at
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, that's pretty much the extent of it.
Yeah. Anyway, it's very, very hard for me to buy it like face value alone. Like if somebody discussed me the situation, I think probability she misread her hand really high. But looking at this event in pure isolation without like any conditional probabilities involved, very, very difficult for me to buy it. And instinctively too, somebody, I'm not buying what you're selling. There's no way that I'm going to buy it. She could have misread it. To be fair, like I said, I mean, this is just how I'm feeling about it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I see that you're convinced on the top level,
yes,
above the bottom level,
right? Because I do feel okay. So let me be practical about this. I do feel that even though, and I'm the one who I don't like to take sides. I don't like to be absolute about things, but there are certain things in life which I think when, again, there's enough practical evidence, it's okay to say it looks like that. So for me to say that, she could have misread her hand is like we're taking all of these contradicting evidences, right? First of all, the fact that she doesn't have a 3 is the number one. And then we try to fit the narrative and say, what if maybe that's what happened? Or what if maybe that's what happened? So we're taking a situation that looks as if by default that she didn't misread her hand. And then we try to find a theory that fits her misreading the hand. And we can do that, but we have to walk around so many different corners to make that happen. And I typically don't like that, when we have to say, the fact that she looked at her cards before the flop, maybe she misread the board. The fact that she said, I don't have a pair, maybe she meant something else. The fact that she never said, but I thought
she never said she didn't have a pair.
But
she said, They said, do you have a pair of 3s? And she said, no.
No. And
that's because Trace is a boat.
No, but do you have a 3? And she said no. So we're saying she didn't respond to that question. She responded to something else. The fact that she didn't react, maybe, she was flustered. The fact that she didn't say, but I thought I had a pair. Sorry about that. Again, maybe because it's an amateur. So like all of these things that we have to create, all of that narrative that we have to talk about. And to me, that just, that feels like we're stretching, and if it was any other situation, we wouldn't think twice about it. Right? That's the only thing that I'm a little bit worried about. But obviously, I mean, we can.
Well, I mean, in listening to the audio, right? Like, if you go back and listen to this episode, when you're trying to explain like why, explain her reaction to when she had Jack high and the board double paired, there was nothing compelling there. It just it appeared to me as if it went against your gut reaction, right? Which felt the need to then explain that, no, she wouldn't say, I don't think so. She'd be more definitive. I never have the best hand here, right? When that's like clearly, I mean, I wouldn't expect somebody to say that. I think that language would be very strong, especially in the moment. You'd say, no, I don't think this is my board. I don't think so, right? So like, to me, I think that there's a case of, and it could be in both camps, right? Where gut reaction is one thing, and then we just kind of ignore other things.
Sure. Yeah, no, absolutely. This is, I'm just saying that we just have to fit way too many things. I mean, the natural thing.
So then the Jack high, right? So then make the argument for Jack high or for cheating, because there's a lot of things you got to make fit for for both of those scenarios as well. Like there's a lot of these questionable, half abstract things that you got to put together to come to some kind of conclusion about what happened. It's not as if like to me, the most reasonable thing is misreading hand, because then you thought you had a pair and you called, and then you realized that you didn't have a pair and you accidentally won the pot. Because Garrett
I love this probe. Yes, no, absolutely. And I think that's where, as a community, we make a little bit of a mistake, right? Because absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. What do I mean by that is this: just because we may not have like the proper theory to justify what happened, it doesn't mean that there's not an explanation, right? So, and I think that's very important, and that's why, part of the reason why, for example, I think the situation is crazy is because it wouldn't make sense if she cheated, and it wouldn't make sense if she didn't cheat in some sense, right? Because nothing. Go ahead. You
mentioned Occam's razor in the beginning and the misuse of it. So dive into that.
Sure. Yeah. So I think there's been actually a couple of things that have been misused, and that could be something that potentially we can contribute to. So there is Occam's razor in its philosophical representation, which basically essentially says the theory that makes the least assumptions is usually the one that is the best. However, this is not the correct definition, because it's not that all assumptions are created equal, right? So for example, I can say, I'm going to die tomorrow based on the assumption that the sun is not going to come out and I'm going to freeze to death, right? I just made one assumption, that I'm going to die tomorrow based on that assumption. But that assumption is so blatantly wrong that it carried so much weight. And then I can say, you know what, I can leave tomorrow because I will survive choking on my breakfast. I will survive, you know, like a car accident going to work. I will survive like a gym accident, and so on and so forth. So I'm making a bunch of assumptions. So somebody can say, according to Occam's razor, you know, the theory that makes the least assumption is the correct one.
Sure.
So there is a lot of issues going on with that. So it's not necessarily the number of assumptions, but what matters is the weight of those assumptions. So for instance, an assumption that she had, you know, a device in her pocket, like in the yoga pants, will carry far more weight than an assumption, you know, she doesn't know how to speak strategy, for instance. So like we gotta weigh these assumptions very, very carefully. And however, it does matter though, that if we have a theory, like for example, going back to the theory of misreading her hand, if we do have a theory that basically in order to use it, we have to make multiple assumptions, we have to worry about that too. Because
there's one assumption. She thought she had a pair.
No, because they're extra assumptions too. And not to go back to that.
No. What are the extra assumptions though?
The extra assumptions is, again, that she's not saying no to somebody who asks her to have a three. She's responding to something else. She's not reacting, even though she realizes at that point that she misread her hand. She's not saying to people, which is like the typical thing that somebody who misread their hand would do in everyday life. I've seen people misreading hands all the time. The first thing they would do is like, holy shit, I misread my hand. You know, and they like, we didn't see any of that. So we're saying she didn't do it because reasons.
And if somebody misreads their hand but doesn't say anything, how would you know?
No. My point is that
well, I'm just poking questions.
No. Okay, I'll answer that. You will not know. You will not know. But that's not the point that I'm making. But that's not the point that I'm making. The point that I'm making is that you have to actually introduce an extra assumption to explain that. And that reduces the probability, right? Because
you're prioritizing that you think she hurt, that she's responding to the person that said in the background, do you have a three? When the first question that was asked was, do you have threes? Right? Before she can even answer that question, somebody else is rapid fire answering or asking another question at some other part of the table. So like the assumption is that she hears all the information and then she responds to both pieces at the same time and saying, no, I don't have threes or a three, right? That was never said. She never even said she had jack high. She never said she had a pair.
Sure. I don't have a horse in that race in some sense, right? Because I don't care if that's, what I'm saying is that this is an extra item to the queue. So we have to explain that as well. As we do have to explain, you give me that much credit. So basically her entire demeanor, like instinctively, we watch this, the entire demeanor is, and at least that's the impression that I'm getting, is that she's read her hand just fine.
But that could mean two things. You give me that much credit. Pocket sixes is a better hand than bottom pair.
You're proving my point right now, right? Because again, you're explaining it in a specific different way. And I'm not saying you can't. What I'm saying is that because it can mean two things, each of those things has a certain probability. So in order for all of here's the thing. In my case, like if she didn't misread her hand, it's okay for just one of these things to not hold. In your case, you need all of them to hold. So you have to multiply all of these probabilities.
Well, let's talk about the probability that she just called all in with jack high. Explain that.
No. We're talking about a different thing, and I want to make that clarification. But it's important because, like, talking about jack high is a completely different. So what you're trying to do now you're trying to find, and I think that's part of an important issue. You're trying to find a theory that would explain it, what gives credence to that theory of misreading her hand. Because that's what I'm saying. If there was no cheating or no cheating allegations, I should say, involved, because we don't know if cheating was involved, then we wouldn't think she misread her hand. But now, because of the Jack high call happened, we really need a theory. And what I'm saying is, what if we don't try to search for a theory, right? We just, because evidence of absence is not absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. So we don't necessarily, we can led astray by specifically trying to fit, that narrative. That's my concern.
Okay.
Right. Yeah.
I got no response.
Now I don't like it. No. What do you want to say?
No, I mean, I don't have any. There's really nothing to say. I don't think. I mean, no matter you have to make assumptions, no matter what
Absolutely
the theory is, and if we're not discussing a theory, then what are we even having a conversation about? I guess, what is the poker world having a conversation about if there's no theory as to what happened, right? This is inherent in the mystery, and this is the hook of the whole situation is what happened. It's a whodunit type of situation.
And I should clarify, perhaps again in me trying to illustrate a point, I exaggerated. No, it's okay to make the theories. There's not a problem to make the theory. My concern is that in our need to create a theory desperately, we may be overestimating the probability of her misreading her hand. That was the point that I was.
Of course, it could totally be biased. I mean, in the same way that Garret assumes that she's cheating, and he's totally he could be totally biased in this situation, or he is totally biased because it happened to him, and so like it had a tangible effect on his bank account balance, right? So like he is affected by it specifically, and that's why they don't allow. I don't even know if it's true. I just know in the movies they don't allow detectives to investigate cases that involve people that are close to them because of potential biases and that sort of thing, right?
Absolutely.
But yeah, anyway, just no matter what conclusion I think anybody comes to is you have to make some assumptions.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I agree.
In this situation, no matter what. And that's where things kind of get murky because
and that's okay too, by the way, right? I mean, it's okay to make assumptions. It's not, it's the other person, again, responsibility to defend ourselves, to tell us to back off, especially if you feel like you've been wronged. Nobody else is gonna protect you except for yourself.
Yeah. To be honest, all this could have been prevented. We mentioned the mistake that Robbi made. Mm-hmm. All of this could have been prevented if she would have been forthright in the moment as to what was going on.
Right.
When we have a bunch of different conflicting information, right, conflicting comments and conflicting answers, that just throws everything into kind of chaos. And it's really hard to put any pieces together at that point because after all that, you think to yourself, well, I can't trust what she says.
Exactly.
And then when you start thinking, I can't trust what she says, then you think, oh, this is a deceptive human. So that's going to lead you to one way or the other.
Yeah, which to be fair, I mean, poker players, I mean, tend to be more deceptive than normal. And, we're expecting a certain amount of, deceptiveness, if you will. So
I expect everybody at the poker table to lie. I expect that whenever I play a hand against someone and then they tell me their rationale for doing what they do and they say a bunch of things that make zero sense, that they're just bullshitting me because it's at a poker table. That's my assumption, right? And this happens so frequently at the poker table that it's laughable. Oh, we all tell the truth. We all say exactly what we were thinking, and nobody ever tells the truth. Nobody ever says exactly what they're thinking or why they did what they do specifically at the poker table. Somehow we just expect that all of these rules of everything that we know about this game to just change in an instant. But okay, that's cool, but probably unrealistic.
Absolutely. And one thing that could potentially, I think, help the conversation in some sense, I think that whatever happened, it is something that is actually very unlikely. Like, so one of the theories is, and you mentioned earlier, like why, like, I mean, we have to make assumptions, and I totally agree. And I'm not, turning people's assumptions down. I'm just trying to, like, I'm having this sense that because the situation is so crazy and what happened is most likely very unlikely, that we sort of like start questioning ourselves if we're crazy. Like, we start questioning the abilities that made us so successful at the poker table in the first place. I mean, that's why I'm saying I'm surprised that people are sticking with that theory of misreading the hand. I'm not saying that it's not a good theory. It's just, very, very difficult to, like, we're sitting on a normal day and not have like 99 out of 100 players, if not 999 out of 1,000 players, to say that there's no way she didn't misread her hand. But the point that I'm trying to make, though, is that if the thing that happened is incredibly unlikely, like, let's say, for example, she accidentally saw G-Man's cards, or for whatever
By the
reason,
way, is that like if she accidentally saw his cards?
Right.
I mean, that's G-Man's mistake.
Sure, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
Again,
Like,
we're not here to crucify anybody, right? We're just trying to make sense of the situation, right?
right. But that would be, yeah, just, you got to protect your own hand.
Absolutely, 100%. I mean, like, I go both ways, right? I mean, you know me, like, I'm all about let the freedom of speech make sure. Okay, yeah. So great. If it's something incredibly unlikely, no matter what theory we come up with, it's not going to be very satisfactory, because, again, it's very unlikely. So probabilities can actually not help us in that situation, which sort of like brings the other issue, which is a technical one. When there's so much variance on estimations or predictions, that happen a lot with, like, really close elections. For example, we saw that with close elections. There was when Nate Silver was posting, like, in 2016 elections, he was posting updates that had huge variance. So you see, like, the line was moving like 10 percentage points or whatever every week. He was criticized correctly from statisticians that when your line moves that wildly, it means that it is actually incorrect. It means that it's incredibly inefficient. A line that moves that wildly, technically speaking, statistically speaking, is highly inefficient, which means it's closer to 50%. So what we're seeing here, and I mean, I use that term technically, when something fluctuates that wildly, when you have that amount of variance, then most likely the uncertainty is so big that we cannot go one way or another. That means we're probably closer to 50-50 than anything else. And this is not a cop-out. It means that there's so much uncertainty. So basically what I'm trying to say is that there's so many weird things going on that not a simple explanation seems to be, fitting to, that situation.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure that I understand, but that's okay. I think that, yeah, it's just one thing for sure is that it was a very unlikely hand and a very rare type of situation that we probably haven't seen before, besides the other investigation, when somebody was doing something wacky, or any time that somebody's had like a super user type of situation. I think you see these wacky things, just going back to like the Ultimate Bet scandal back in 2008 or whenever that was. So yeah, like, it's a very rare thing that went down. From a pure poker perspective, and watching all the streams and all the hands where she VPIP'd, all the hands where she played, I would say that, like, if you're calling with Jack high, then consistently you would imagine that there's a lot of Jack high calls. There's a lot of weird things that happen, right? If that's part of your strategy. And as I mentioned before, there was nothing weird. There was nothing strange in any other hand that she played over the course of like the 20 hours or however long she was on the stream, which makes me think that it's not a poker thing. That to me is like the biggest indicator that, I mean, maybe she called with Jack high, but it would be totally inconsistent with everything else that she did on every single other stream and every single other hand that she played, which is a weird inconsistency. And so
it's a very good point, by the way, and it's the reason why Garret was so flustered. right? Because it was very inconsistent with everything else he's done. So he thought that this is completely uncharacteristic, and it could be, it could be as simple as that, like against all odds, everything lined up perfectly. She did misread her hand, right? And that happened, or she saw Garrett's hand, or she had like a weird device that for whatever reason she decided to use, like something, a theory that it's not going to be satisfactory one way or another. Like, I mean, something incredibly unlikely. But I don't think that any of these theories are, unless, the theory of like having a device and then they actually find a device. But even then, like the whole cheating is not the most sophisticated cheating that even if cheating happened, right? I mean, what kind of cheating?
They were cheaters who passed up a bunch of really good spots to take the worst spot of all time.
Right. Exactly.
Okay.
And that's kind of weird, and it's so it's very it's very and also again, if we want to talk about things which we think they're factual or nearly factual, is that Robbi did not refuse to defend herself, so she went to join multiple. Usually people tend to not do that, right? So people tend to, if they've done something shady, right? Most people tend to not speak for themselves. Am I wrong about this, Brad? Like,
I don't know. Apostle went on Mattisau, but that wasn't much of a interaction. Like there was no like pressing or asking of difficult questions there. But I don't know the answer. Some things. So I Googled misread hands, misread boards. I found numerous examples of that. In general, though, you are right. When somebody misreads their hand, they have a reaction when they turn it face up of, oh my God, I thought I had something else, right? That's tends to be the first thing out of their mouths. The only example I found of somebody looking at their whole cards, and by the way, there weren't many videos of this out there on the internet either. Looking at their cards right before they called and misreading their hand. The only one was Ivy in like a stud 8 or better, when I mentioned it before, where he like looked at his hands and folded. And then there's a video of Eric Person misreading the board just probably a week before, 2 weeks before in a hand. And there are numerous examples of people misreading the board, and misreading the board to me feels like an analog to misreading your hand, because the board is face up in front of everyone. You can literally stare at the cards that are face up and misread the board. So yeah, just I don't know. There's some anomalies that went down that are inconsistent with people typically misreading their hand. It's just a very bizarre type situation with real surprise that it set the poker world on fire. But ultimately, what we are card players. Right. Like the people that listen to this show, what I am a card player. I look at data points and I prioritize them and make a decision and move on.
That's right.
Sometimes my decisions are right. Sometimes my decisions are wrong. Sometimes they are terrible, and sometimes they are great. And I would just say that Garrett looked at the data points, prioritized them, made a decision, and played his hand. That's right. In the same way that other people observing the situation, having a theory or having a general belief,
absolutely,
they prioritize different data points, they come to a conclusion, and they move on, because like we're never going to know the answer to this question. Like unless, she says that she cheated. Well,
and even then, we're not going to be able to know, right? Because maybe she does that for grabbing attention. Again, I mean, we can always.
Well, maybe she shows how, right? Like shows there's an inside person. Maybe the investigation uncovers somebody at like I don't know. Like unless there's more information that is revealed that we currently don't have access to, we're never going to know the real answer here. So all you can do is play the hand, have an opinion, assign it different percentages, and move on on a personal basis.
I agree with you 100%. And it kind of also goes to show you that, it is such a bizarre situation that, like we're starting to question everything. I mean, people are looking at those pictures with like a device in her pants, and they say, oh, it's just it could be just the reflection or something like that. I don't think we would do that in any normal circumstance, right? I mean, here we're in a situation where we're presented with a duck and we say, well, maybe it's an elephant, So because the situation is so weird, and nothing seems to fit, so we start making, and this is actually showing us something. it shows us the idea, which is the other thing that we haven't talked about, the Bayesian idea. There's a lot of misconceptions on the Bayesian idea too. When you're dealing with like scenarios which are Sherlock Holmes-like, you know, when you can eliminate the impossible, then what's left, however improbable, must be right. So what we're left with here, like we're in a situation where we're eliminating all of this things that, you know, we cannot, you know, like she called with Jack high, like that's part of what happened. We cannot say that she had, you know, 3 of a kind there. So we eliminate the fact that she had a strong hand. She called with Jack high. She knew she had a weak hand. So when we eliminate all of these possibilities, all the other stuff, all we're left with are situations that they're so unlikely that now we have to battle between, is it unlikely A, is it unlikely B, or is it unlikely C? And as a matter of fact, is it ultra unlikely A versus ultra unlikely B, or ultra unlikely C? So we talk like madmen and conspiracy theorists. Right?
I think I think she's an alien that has advanced alien technology that allowed her to have absolute information. But she's also not super understanding of poker as an alien, so didn't know how to, you know.
How bad do you think she is? Like, you know, how I had some theories, people telling me she wouldn't beat like 5-5 live.
I don't care. I mean, I think that most people don't beat 5-5 live. I would say like she's an amateur. Okay. She's an amateur who's a lower level poker player, right? And there's no like shame in that. But sure, that to me is my read on the situation. And again, I watched multiple streams and I looked at it through the lens of what I understand and know about recreational poker players from data. Mm-hmm. And all of her actions are consistent with what the data says. A recreational player's typical raise sizing is min, or 2.5x. That's the highest frequency size that's chosen. Right. I've seen people say I think Doug said she raised minimal. That's absurd. You would never raise minimum on the turn. Blah, blah, blah. It's like, dude, I don't
think you said that, but yeah, I know what you're saying.
Right, like it went in like the analysis of the poker analysis of the situation, and like everything that I have seen is indicative that, yeah, she's just doing what recreationals do. Right. And that, like, almost predictable before she takes her actions.
Sure. I would agree with that. And most of the stuff, except for that specific hand, unfortunately, which makes it, because again, I mean, like, I've seen everything. I'm dealing with like all sorts of amateurs, all sorts of levels, like from people who just literally just learned the game all the way to playing for years and they want to improve. And I'd say that I've never seen anything like that. Either from my students or, you know, me personally. I played like close to 2 million hands online, you know, so it's not, I've never seen anything like that. And
like the call with Jack high.
Yeah.
That is the thing that is so weird. Right. Raising the turn with ace king, seen it a billion times. Yeah. I mean, it's not like this is not a thing that happens. I mean,
calling the flop too with the backdoors, you know, and you know, that's
a paired board, calling a quarter pot. This is totally expected. Yes. This is the highest frequency event that she calls the flop with that hand. Doesn't even matter backdoor. She just like has 2 cards. Right. Just call the flop with 2 cards in position on a paired board because you think, this person doesn't have it.
I do have a question, which you know, it's very relevant to you and I specifically.
Sure.
What would you do if you were Faraz Jaka in this situation? Someone that I have huge respect for. Like he has influenced my thinking about the game. He is one of those level-headed people. And I want to preface this because it's important from what I want to say next. But like someone who always advocates for poker players to keep a cool head when they win a tournament instead of like going and blowing off all of their money. Like very, very frugality and business sense, really, really smart guy.
I think you should do nothing. He's not God.
Oh yeah, no. What do you think? How would you handle the situation?
How would I handle it?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. What would you do if you were?
I would say that I'm not God. I mean, it's how is it my responsibility what somebody does on their own? Like, I wish it were so easy. The way that people talk about teaching people and communication in poker, that I just tell somebody you shouldn't make the game worse by telling people things. I tell people all the time, and guess what? They don't fucking listen. They don't internalize it. They don't think about it. They don't execute it. They don't use it. like this happens way more often than not. The people that like listen are the outliers as it relates to this. So like, I mean, he coached someone that reached out to him. And by the way, kudos for her for reaching out to a coach, for trying to educate herself and get better at poker and seeking out Faraz Jaka. And then he coached her and that's it. I mean, what I would just say, like, I don't know. We didn't cover the Jack High calls last Tuesday. Maybe that'll be next week. But I mean, how am I responsible for how a student of mine plays? That's that like that. I just think it's. I don't think that I would do anything. I would just say, yeah, she bought sessions and she played poker, and beyond that, like, what am I supposed to do?
Very, very, very similar right here. I mean, I always say that, you know, every time, like, you know, one of my students does really, really well, I always, and they say I wouldn't do it without you. I say, no, you would have, you know, I'm happy to be there to help, because you get, the instructor only gets partial credit and partial responsibility. The student gets always the full credit and the full responsibility, right? That's very important, I think, because, you know, it's their job to decide how much of that information that they see flowing from the other side they let in, and how much of that information they don't let in. So they have to make a lot of decisions themselves, and I think that's important. And I think for the most part, you know, the only thing that I personally didn't like is him, you know, trying to rationalize the situation. Again, I think we're falling into that trap, and that's why, you know, if anything, I'm animated about this. It's okay to actually say, listen, I mean, you know, we don't buy that. Like, that doesn't make any sense. I mean, you didn't misread the hand. Something else happened, and that's okay. That doesn't mean you cheated. But I mean, just because we cannot conveniently find a theory that explains everything, we don't have to jump to conclusions. And he said a lot of things, like, you know, some of the things.
But isn't saying that you don't buy misread hand jumping to a conclusion?
A conclusion about her misreading her hand, not a conclusion about her cheating. Yes. No, here's the thing. There's nothing wrong with jumping in a conclusion. I mean, we can jump into a conclusion if we think she cheated or not, if we have enough evidence.
Sure.
But the point that I'm trying to make, the distinction that I make between the two, it's clear in the situation of the cheating that we have a lot of uncertainty involved. That same uncertainty is not present in her reading or misreading the hand. So I feel like we are getting confused, like, with the things that we actually can say something about and the things we cannot say something about. And the point, again, this is a point that I've made a million times. If we actually always were looking for certain answers, we would never be able to give an answer to anything. But there are certain things that, you know, we can just say.
So you want to hear my sense of this?
Absolutely.
And this could be off base. My sense of this is like,
nothing is
you're anti people jumping to conclusions, but then you jump to conclusions, or anti theories, but then you have your own theory, right? No, and that's the disconnect from my side. It's like, oh, so like people can't have theories or jump to conclusions, but then you jump to a conclusion or you have a theory in almost the same sentence, right? Which to me is like, okay, you know, I don't really know how to penetrate or even, you know, continue the conversation when that's the sort of paradigm that I see you in.
Absolutely. And you see, that's exactly the point that I was trying to make. You see, you are exactly getting into that idea again of why we need meta-humility. My point is not that we should not make conclusions. Like, I'm operating on a different level. There's mini conclusions and there is an ultimate conclusion. In order to make an ultimate conclusion on a thing that we don't know anything about, right? So the big final conclusion, we need to first resolve the mini conclusions that will lead us to this final conclusion, right? So we do agree that there's different types of conclusions, big ones and smaller ones. Right?
Yeah.
Okay, very good. So there is, that's number one. So we're operating on different levels. Clearly, since the object of question is a thing that we disagree on, we cannot make that conclusion, because this is something that we don't currently have enough evidence. So this is something for the listener to come to their own conclusion, so to speak, right? But for the big conclusion. But there is other things right? Like, for instance, we agree that E equals MC squared, right? I mean, there's some things that in the past we have agreed on. So there is nothing wrong with us. And that's actually exactly my point. Like, if we always put everything that we're talking about into the same category, we're universal about everything we say, then we will not be able to act. So instead, what I'm saying, we're doing a reduction to the things that we're more comfortable, things that we've been doing, things that have served us well for a long time. We stick to those, right? And then the rest, people decide. Still, it's not enough. Like, even if we agree that she did misread her hand, that doesn't explain why she called with Jack high, right? So there's still a lot of jumps that need to be made. But I'm a big advocate of sticking to the things that we know, that we trust, and not put everything into the same bucket.
And
does that make sense?
What we know, yeah, but what we know and trust is subjective, right?
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
from person to person. So that's where things can become unraveled, because
Absolutely.
yeah, you know and trust what you saw in the hand that makes you convinced that she didn't misread her hand, right? And somebody else with
convinced with Metahumility still present, right?
Sure,
so
convinced,
right.
But so basically allocating it a much lower percentage in the bucket of possibilities,
right?
But not zero.
Convinced. Yeah, exactly.
Right, and then someone else, me in this situation, and also Phil Ivey, by the way, I'm going to borrow his gravitas. And
no, that's fine. I think Phil Ivey was not paying attention, actually, and that's okay. Like, that's yeah.
But yeah, so from everything that I saw, everything that I heard, to me, it felt like misreading hand is the most likely scenario, right? And so, again, that just shows that there's subjectivity in what we think we know and what we think our experience is telling us.
Absolutely.
Because even that can be misleading. We can be very wrong, even starting from there.
Yeah, and this is not something I disagree with, right? I mean, that's, there is no, it's just that what I'm, the subtle point that I'm trying to make is we need to draw a line between keeping an open mind and start questioning everything. It's correct. Like, there are certain things, everything needs to be questioned, but not everything needs to be questioned at the same level, is what I'm saying, right? So I'll be the first one to tell you that I'm not certain about anything, including that. But there are certain things that, like when we see, it's very similar to the naked emperor. The king is naked, somebody has to point to the fact, but he is naked, we gotta, at some point, at least consider the fact that he's naked. And if we're not, here's another thing too.
I don't know this parable or metaphor of the naked emperor, by the way.
Oh, the story is very, very simple. Basically, there was a guy who was trying to con a king somewhere, and then they sold him invisible clothes for a lot of money, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a story, right? So the king was like, okay, yeah, I'm gonna wear this, and you look amazing. And then everybody was afraid of the king and said, yeah, king, you look amazing. And there was a kid, hey, the king is naked, Mm-hmm. So the point is, again, maybe these were invisible clothes, and maybe he did look amazing, but at the very least, and this is the caution that I'm raising, and hopefully this point is clear. It's not about being certain or anything like that. We don't know what happened. We don't technically know if she misread her hand, but at least when we actually start to mistrust the instincts in the things which sort of, like, in some sense, practically obvious, nothing is perfectly obvious, but the things which are practically obvious in front of us, at the very least, we need to acknowledge the fact that we're ignoring those things, right? And we say, listen, we are right now taking a huge turn to create a theory which...
But isn't this poker, right? Like, isn't this like just encapsulate the whole poker experience?
Not if you start folding aces pre-flop. That's what I'm saying. I mean, yes, like, but the thing is that we're getting to the point where we need to make cases for, like, starting to fold aces pre-flop. So I don't
like that. Like I said, I think it's going into like Weekly World News wacky type of behavior at this point. That's what it just, things are getting very weird.
Oh, the whole situation, you mean?
The whole situation is getting
wacky.
Right. People, like, they're, again, it's like it just feels very conspiracy theory-esque, grasping at straws, a lot of random people saying a bunch of random things, and it's just gotten wacky and out of hand at this point, right?
I agree.
That's, and so to me, like, at some point you just make the decision based on what you know and the data points that you have and your experience in said scenario. And I mean, I think that I'll be happy to just let this one go too. Like,
and I agree with you 100%. Like, why not let it go? Like, I mean, say just, I don't know, like we are in a situation where, why do we have to sort of like lie to ourselves and say, no, your eyes didn't see what they saw. Your instincts, the things that you've been trusting and they've been,
I think most people do say that they don't know at this point. Most people do.
That's no, and I mean, I was saying, like, yeah, but it just, why do we have to create a theory that can also be immediate, like practically falsified, right? That's the thing that concerns me. Like when
it's a human condition. It's biology, genetics. This is like, have you met human beings, right? Like, the global cabal of cannibalizing, I don't know who, some people, like, by the Illuminati. I mean,
but just because we're not perfect, it doesn't mean we cannot strive to be. And I'm the first one to say that I'm imperfect, right? But you just understand my point, though, right?
I understand your point.
My concern, like,
yeah, I understand your concern, but I would say the thing to me, as somebody who has dealt with a fair amount of conspiracy theorists in their lives, it's just there's no reaching it. Right. That, like, when somebody's convinced of a thing, once they go off that path and they use that as their subjective map of reality, it's really hard coming back from it. It's really, really difficult. They get lost, and then it's just it's a very difficult type of situation, as I think anybody whose family, friends, relatives have gone down that rabbit hole, or maybe they themselves went down a specific rabbit hole and found their way back, right? It just, to me, it's, we can strive to be better as humans, and I think that we should, but I think that for a decent percentage of people, that it's just, that's the path that they're going to go down, and that there's no escaping that just is part of our DNA.
No, absolutely. But I mean, at the same time, we can, and there's also a lot of intelligent listeners, and we can remind ourselves, we can remind each other, maybe you don't have to go through that path. Maybe you can say there's not a good theory yet. That's just wait to get, more evidence, instead of, like, again.
And maybe it's fun,
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Maybe reading about the, the wolf child who was birthed by two angry pigeons. Maybe that's a fun story to read in Weekly World News, and it entertains you and gives you some happiness in your life, or joy, or whatever it is, right? The fish boy from Kalamazoo. I mean, I don't know. Like, maybe that just makes you happy, and you pick up Weekly World News. Like, I don't know. Maybe if that's your thing, then go for it. I mean, but I think, like, having, I think it's just a thing that, like, you can let go. We have the information. We have as much information as we can possibly have at this stage of the game, I think. That's right. And then we can just say, okay, we played the hand. We did the best we could. We have our opinion. We have the information. This is why, like, Knives Out wasn't a 7-day movie. It was an hour and a half. It has a conclusion. We don't have to talk about it for years.
Absolutely. And this is also why this situation might be a little bit interesting, right? Because, again, we cannot find what's going on. Should we go real quickly through I know this is a very long one, but
it's a long episode.
It's a long episode, but we should probably wrap it up.
May as well hit the setup. We can't leave those threads that you mentioned in the beginning uncovered.
Absolutely. I did ask some questions. Do you want to?
Sure.
Okay.
Hit them.
So the first question: do you think Robbi misread her hand?
Good question, Duncan.
So we're gonna go quickly with this. Yes, 18%. No, 82%. Should players have the right to make serious cheating accusations on evidence but no proof? One possibility was yes, it's a free country. No, innocent presumption. What do you think?
I think that we have. I think that you can say that you think someone is cheating.
Mm-hmm.
That's my opinion.
I agree with that too. I mean, it's not, again, it's about free speech. Again, you're not, they can sue you. You have like full response. That's the beautiful thing about the free speech. Anytime you say something, you take full responsibility of what you say. So it can backfire. So I agree with that. By the way, yes.
In the same way that I think somebody can say in a live poker setting, they can stand up from the table and say, you played your hand terribly and you're an idiot. Absolutely. And your parents made a mistake in giving birth to you. I think that they are allowed to say that. Now, there are consequences to saying such thing. So have to only use it when appropriate.
When appropriate, exactly. And at what point it becomes, like you said, like sexual harassment, for example, at what point it becomes an assault. That's a difficult question. So yes, about 73%, no. So freedom of speech over innocence presumption, 73-27%. Mm-hmm. Is non-insider cheating possible during live streams? So the answers were always possible or highly unlikely. I mean, you cannot say no, but like, is it like sort of like, yes, realistically possible or highly unlikely?
I think it's less likely on a live stream than it is under a normal setting, but not zero.
Not zero, exactly. Yeah, and I think that's an important point. I mean, yeah, this was a difficult question for me to phrase. I'm always trying to give like the answers because there's so much nuance, and like making 50-50 questions is very difficult. But one takeaway is that there are so many things that we're not even considering. We don't even know what we don't know. Like, we don't even know what it is possible. So it is possible that there's a theory that nobody has considered yet, including cheating and non-cheating theories. So
to go to the live stream, I think, so this may not be a good comparison, but I don't even know where I read this, but I know that over time there's multiple theories on why this is the case, by the way. But like serial killers, the amount of serial killers in the United States has gone down substantially over the last few decades. And the main theory as to why is because of the visibility, the cameras, closed circuit TV. It's a lot harder to get away with killing someone and DNA evidence than it used to be. And so basically piggybacking from that when everything is caught on stream, when people are looking at your pants to see if there's an object in your pants, it's a lot harder to get away with something on stream than it is in, somebody's home game down the road if you were cheating. So there's this like unnecessary risk of like, why would you do it on a stream? And then two, if there's any suspicion, well, you're going to be hyper micro analyzed until the end of time.
That's a very good point, and that's something that people kind of consider. And the interesting thing is that on a live stream, also there is more, I guess we can call, there's more data to be used for cheating, which is not available. Yeah. So sometimes you're getting in those situations where there is both forces. So it's it becomes harder to cheat and then easier to cheat at the same time. So, and then it's a question, what is the net benefit? Is it net more or net less? Yeah,
if I'm in prison and I'm going to shiv somebody, I'm going to find out where there's a blind spot in the camera. I'm not going to just do it out in the open, right? Like I'm going to do it in a way that makes it least likely for me to get caught, which is not under the bright lights of a camera.
Brad, why would you do that? What if you at some point get incarcerated and you need to do that, and now they can use it against you, Brad? Like, why would you do that?
I mean, yeah, like, so don't follow me where there's blind spots on cameras, apparently, if you feel you're in danger of shivving.
Oh my goodness. I'm sure listeners by that point, they're just screaming on the screen. Everybody has like a lot of thoughts on the subject, and which is fine. I mean, okay. So the question was, is non-insider cheating possible during live streams? Always possible, highly unlikely. Always possible took the cake, about 79%. Highly unlikely, they remembered 21%. So people, again, they are concerned. If you strongly suspect cheating, but you have no access to a smoking gun, then you should do nothing or apply pressure.
Apply pressure.
Yes. Okay. Yes. I think that was 50-50-44 apply pressure, but it was closer. So some people, again, they're thinking that applying pressure is some sort of like a violation of something, and it is violation of personal space. But again, people
As
should
someone
have,
that has been cheated, I can say that
me too.
applying pressure is better than not applying pressure.
Absolutely. I actually have a story of what happened to me when I was 14 years old, that I had to actually apply pressure on somebody. So do you want to hear it?
Well, I mean, you set them up. You can't not tell the story now, right?
Okay. So I was 14, right? Summer camp. And I know most of the guys in my tent, except for one guy who they came from an organization, like a charity organization. They got them into the summer camp. So towards the end of the season, I go back to my tent and I witness my cell phone missing. Oh, there was a time where I had a Nokia when I was 14, right?
Yeah.
So and so I'm looking around. Maybe I forgot it somewhere. I'm asking around, so I cannot find it anywhere. So at some point, you have to suspect. I mean, I did. I don't know if it was correct or not, but I suspect that somebody took it away from me. Like they were worth some money. I mean, not incredible amount of money, but some amount of money. So how do I get it? Like I ask everybody, do you see my cell phone? Many people were like, what, your cell phone? And I see this guy in the room that I mentioned earlier, and he was acting suspicious. And so I think there's a chance that he got it, but obviously I have no evidence. So what I did, mind you, I mean, I was 14 years old. I mean, I go to talk to people outside. Nobody could help me. Actually, coincidentally, like a very important friend of ours had died that day, and everybody was like mourning. It was a terrible situation too. So I decided, like I have to figure out by myself. I mean, I have to do something about it. So I came up with the oldest trick in the book, right? So I go in and I say, okay, guys, I was just right outside, and John, my friend, he told me they saw the person who actually took it. So I know exactly who that person is, and I'm gonna go and report them right now. So, but here's the thing: I really don't care, like, to create a commotion. All I want is I want my cell phone back. I know who that person is. I just want to give you, like 30 minutes. Come to me. I don't really care.
Yes, you ran a bluff.
Ran a bluff, exactly, right? Yes. This kid will become a poker player one day. So, by the way, do you think there's like any moral issues there with that approach?
I don't know. No,
okay.
I don't know.
Okay. This is
if I could
yeah.
probably analyze it more in depth, but yeah. I don't think so.
Okay, so it's some people may think, because apparently some people think. So anyway, to make a long story short, the guy like approaches me, he says, hey, listen, like I took the cell phone. And I was like, all right, where is it? So he goes and he gives it to me, and I surprisingly everything was intact except for the SIM card. So applying pressure sometimes works. Like what else can you do? And the worst thing of it all is that I had already decided that I was gonna go through with my bluff, which may or may not be the right thing to do, but I like to apply pressure.
Yeah, like a friend of mine in Florida had his iPad stolen, and they had it on camera and they could track it. But the thing is actually, it was kind of funny that he put his iPad on a garbage can, and the police officer basically told him that, like, technically it's in the trash. Technically, like, you threw it away, and so it's not theft because they got it from the trash. But then he went and talked to the person who got it and basically did some verbal jujitsu, aka ran a bluff, and the guy gave the iPad back. And this was like a decade or so ago, and like, to me, I don't really have a problem with that. I think it's a technicality. And the reality is like, there have to be some kind of mechanisms for resolving such situations, because if you're into the business of just trusting people at their word and trusting people to, like, take accountability and take responsibility for everything they do, then you got a hard life ahead of you, because people struggle in that regard.
Absolutely. And you make a very good point, which ties actually to some of the things that we're discussing already. Like, there is a lot of gray areas involved. And like you said, I mean, there needs to be some sort of like mechanism, some sort of process. But when that process is not available, then perhaps the only way we can figure it out is by expressing our own versions, what I call the free speech, right? I mean, you apply pressure, the other person applies pressure, and hopefully we get there somewhere, right? One of the things that I discovered recently, for example, is that I was always curious, why, some people who have like such strong evidence against them in the court of law, they get acquitted. And I realized that the justice system in this country, intelligently enough, like I thought it was a bug, but it's actually a feature. It's not about justice. The legal system is not about justice. There's no such thing as justice in a court of law. It's about the balance of power. So they are allowing people to express both of their opinions and cases as forcefully as they can, and hopefully we get a good approximation of what actually happened. That's why the lawyers, for example, don't even care about factual guilt. They only care about legal guilt. All they care about is, can the opposition prove that you actually did the thing that you're being accused of? So that's a balance of power as opposed to who's right and who's wrong. And I think there's it's ingenious, like that as faulty as the system is, it is, nobody knows what the truth is in many situations. And again, in
many situations, like, don't know what the truth is. Laws are a set of rules that are basically a game that lawyers understand and play very well in the legal system. And then so when you go to court, you basically hire someone who's very good at playing this legal game based on the laws that are on the books and understand it and know exactly what to do, or have a good idea of like how they want to pursue it, what line they want to take and how they want to go about it. But it's not about what actually happened and what's fair and justice as we sort of abstractly internalize that concept.
Correct. And then the question becomes, and again, I don't want to get sidetracked, but are these guys good lawyers or are they shady in that sense? Because the system will say, it's sort of a rhetorical question, but.
Yeah. It's I would say that depends on the perspective and paradigm that you're coming from.
Exactly. But one more thing that I just want to say in this sort of like long thread is the point that you made earlier, and you're absolutely right. Like, how can you say, don't make conclusions, and then you make conclusions in the same breath? Sure. The point, and this is, again, it comes down to that iPad thread, right? There are certain things which are very gray. And for those things which are very gray, it's clear which are things are gray, like communism or capitalism, that's a gray area. Religious or atheist, that's a gray area. Like, there's people differently who have like different approaches, paper or plastic, that's a gray area. Like, all of these sort of like, gray things, we don't necessarily have to make conclusions. But if there are specific things that not all things are created equal, right? I mean, if I take a ball and let it go, it's going to fall down more often than not. That's not so much of a gray area. So for those things that they're not necessarily gray areas, we can actually make conclusions more frequently. So I think there is a danger in expanding our open mind in situations where it can actually hinder us from action. And I think that was actually the mistake that Garret made, because again, that's what Metahumility can help us with, because we really need to act. We need to act. And Metahumility tells no matter what you do, you will never have perfect information, but that's okay. That's okay. That's what the meta is. That's okay. Go ahead and do your thing. Go ahead, be confident in your action. That's okay. Be confident. And that's the point that I'm trying to convey. There are certain things where there's so much uncertainty, we don't have to make conclusions. But there are certain things which actually confidence, it's a good thing to have. And if we didn't have that confidence, then it's going to become really blurry line between indecisiveness and humility. We want to be humble, but decisive at the same time. That's because I mean, again, I'm trying to, because these are things that I'm thinking about, right?
Sure.
Say, like, how do you make conclusions and then say don't make conclusions? Because they don't live at the same level. I don't have the same amount of evidence. On the one hand, this is something
but
that
it's hard it's hard to understand what level you're coming from each moment, right?
Absolutely.
So
and
that's where like a big communication disconnect can come from.
Absolutely. And that's on me, 100%, right? But I mean, again, like, I've seen people doing all those things about mistreating the hands. Like, I've seen that like 1,000 times. Sure. So, you get the point from there.
Right.
Excited again.
And then at the end of the day, did we hit all the bullet points that we talked about in the intro?
Yeah. We do have two more questions. So, should Garret have accepted the money back? And do you think there was foul play last night?
Yes, Garrett should have accepted the money. And that's because he may not have another opportunity to accept money. And then you can kind of make a decision from there, or have an arbitrator or somebody investigate it independently, knowing that, like, you know, you don't have to sue somebody, you don't have to come after somebody. I mean, chasing money is kind of a futile effort, I think, in this case, long drawn out, etc. So yeah, I think he should have accepted the money. And then what was the final one? Do I think there was cheating?
Do you think there was a foul play in some way?
I mean, there was foul play, but I don't think there was cheating. But I think that there was there was definitely some foul play. I think that just coming to like, the thing is, no matter how smart you are, no matter how good you are, you know, Garrett makes mistakes. Garrett plays poker hands where he loses them. He makes a questionable call. He makes a questionable bluff. So he's not an infallible human being. And so the biggest mistake to me is the confidence level that he had that she was cheating. That was expressed long after the stream was over, and probably even up until right now, for all I know. Maybe I'm making an assumption. That's what it appears like from the outside. That to me is just, yeah, it's not great. And then from, you know, the other side of the coin, I personally, as far as foul play, I don't think there was cheating. I would say it's probably 5%, maybe, is the weight that I would give that. Just because none of the active theories make any sense to me. Just seems like wild lunacy.
It's borderline.
Yeah. So yeah, those are my answers. I think very small percent chance that she was cheating, and also disagree with the way that Garrett handled everything. And by the way, like, again, I don't know of tons of precedent for this situation historically, but hopefully the high-level poker players that play for hundreds of thousands of dollars on stream learn something from this.
Yeah, I mean, I do think, actually, like, personally, like, I have learned a lot of things. I don't know about you. Do you think like it was a net positive experience, like the conversation, like thinking about that philosophically, right? Writing about things and talking to people?
Net positive, probably not for me.
Yeah.
Maybe for the community at large, but for me, it's been somewhat of a distraction for the past week from my other higher priority things.
Okay, that's a good point. Yeah, we don't have all the time in the world, but I do think it's a good way to actually put everything together. You know, like responsibility comes into play, accountability comes into play.
Sure.
Again, like all of these concepts, you know, like cheating, social influencers, the power that people have, uncertainty, how probabilities come into this place, like all of these things, sort of like, you know.
And by the way, I think sensationalizing something,
sensationalization
is, to me, I hate it. I hate it. I can't stand sensationalizing.
No pushback here.
Of things. And I, like, you disagree. I do think people should have responsibility as it relates to other people's reputations and how other people think about poker players in the space, because I do think it matters. And I do think that there are negative consequences to sensationalist accusations and just random things that happen. I think the person experiencing those said things, it has a very negative effect on them. There was, you know, Fedor Holtz accused someone who, Pat Howard, coaches in an MTT, basically said that they're cheating here, right? Just based on one hand. They did in-depth investigation into all the players' accounts that had played against each other historically. They found nothing. Nothing came of it, but it was a real shit situation for the players and for Pat. And I remember that because it happened fairly recently. And so, like, to me, for influencers, there's responsibility to, like, not put this on people if it's not necessary, right? And to not keep a story going on and on and on and on and on if it's not necessary.
Can I clarify this a little bit? Because actually I agree largely with you, right? You said I disagree with that, and I want to just clarify the point with which I disagree. Actually, I agree with that. I do think it should be our responsibility to know what comes out of our mouth, because we can influence people and we can hurt people. And I'm the first one to say, I said that earlier, right? I don't want to jump to the conclusions, big conclusions, right? On things that we're still very uncertain, and the jury's still out there, because again, I don't want to influence people one way or another. I do believe that, and also think a lot of the mistakes that modern academics make in many respects, they jump into topics that they know very little about, and they, just because they're good at a different area. But my point has always been, I don't want to enforce this through public policy, right? I want this to be something that people should self-regulate, right? I don't want to do that. I should not want to do that. But if some people, go out of their way and they do it, there's nothing we can do about it other than learn how to protect ourselves.
Sure, unless there's legal recourse in the case of just saying things that have a negative effect on other people's lives. The Alex Jones and Sandy Hook thing.
That's right. That's right.
Where,
which, by the way, the
real life consequences.
Real life consequences. Which, by the way, the legal recourse, we were talking about that a couple of weeks back, is a proxy of what our ancestors have told us, because the laws are not random, right? Something has happened. So as we're tinkering with society, we found that specific things are better in most cases than not. So that's what the laws are. They're not like randomly one person one day decided, let's make that law. Let's tinker and let's see if it works. And I'm not saying the laws are perfect, but what I'm saying is that, and I'm not saying that all of the laws should always be followed all the time, but the thing is that they should be more often than not. And the reason for that is because a lot of wisdom has come from the past to make those things. It's not just like a random guy one day decided something. So for someone to say, you know what, I'm going to defy this, it is very meta arrogant in some sense. So these things are not random.
And the truth is, there are consequences, like legally,
right,
for in the Alex Jones case, and there are also consequences that can never be undone, as it relates to the people who are affected by this for many years, which is why influencers have a responsibility in what they say.
Absolutely.
Because that thing makes me internally irate. It's just, to me, it's irresponsible, and it's very awful. But obviously, it doesn't come close to anything that's happened in the poker space. It's just the sensationalizing of this story and the kind of weird angles and weird places that it's taken us. It's like,
I totally agree.
It's shocking. It's only happened a week ago. I feel like this happened 10 years ago.
So much information. I guess we didn't talk much about base, but I guess we can cover everything. So is there anything you wanted to add, or it has been on your mind? Or
Nah, I've said everything that I feel like I've needed to say in this situation.
Absolutely.
As I said before, I listened to I watched everything. I took the body of evidence to the best of my ability, using all the data points that I had, and I landed where I landed.
Absolutely.
And that's all I can do at this point. It's like, just let it go, let the hand go, fold. And if there's new information, or not fold, but just let the chips fall where they may, when there's new information, then opinion might change.
Exactly. And maybe this is as good of a place as any. It's not necessary. I mean, we have a lot of responsibilities, right? But the responsibility of actually having a verdict on whether cheating happened or not is not necessarily one of them. We don't have to come to a conclusion, even internally. I mean, we may want to do it for our own sake, or sanity, or whatever. But it's not just because, again, there's a platform. It doesn't mean. I don't know. What do you think about? Do you think that it's your responsibility to come to a verdict?
I don't know. I don't know if it's my responsibility or not. I mean, I'm a poker player, right? I'm a poker coach. My answer is it depends to most all questions that are asked to me on the planet. I do think that, like, before acting, we have to understand the upside and the downside of this, right? So so with Garrett's accusations, right? He's looking at how he's personally affected by it negatively, right? Assumes that there's cheating, right? But what's on the flip side of that? What's an alternative? An alternative is something else happened, and an amateur beat him out of $250,000, and he effectively yelled at her until she gave the money back to him, and then he kept the money. That's a shitty alternative that probably wasn't thought enough about compared to the other one before accusations are made. So like, I think that, yeah, it's a very emotional, volatile situation. Being very sure, you have to be very sure and understand the other side of the coin, right? This happens a lot of times in life where, another thing that happened is there was an accusation in not my immediate family, but somewhere in the family, where an in-law had basically done something with a student, right? And the bias of the people close to the situation was, they're just lying. They're just making this up, right? Nobody's considering, something damaging happened here. And we're just totally ignoring the possibility and saying that they're lying when this person could have been violated and emotionally scarred for the rest of their lives. Right. So like, we have to look at the alternatives and the consequences. So like, you're right, but what if you're wrong? Well, if you're wrong, then, in this situation with Garret, if you're wrong, then basically you lost to an amateur on a live stream, yelled at them, they gave the money back, and that's the conclusion. What fucking kind of conclusion is that? That's terrible.
Not to be pedantic here, and I agree with you 100%, but I think, do you think he would have done that if, he somehow magically somebody showed up and said, no, she's innocent? And he like,
no, I don't think he would have done it. I don't.
You know why I'm asking? Because is he really like, can we actually do that? Can we actually assume reality? Or is reality a Robbi, which is 50-50 at that point? Do you understand what I'm saying? Like, because if he actually knew she was innocent, and if we could be in a reality where she knew he was innocent, he wouldn't have done that. So what I'm saying is, really reality, or is really a 50-50 situation, and we have to accept the 50-50 as the reality, because that's the only thing we have access to, and that's the only thing we can have access to. In other words,
then like, accept the 50-50. I mean,
but if we accept the 50-50, then she's not 100% innocent. So that picture that you described eloquently, and it's correct, it never exists. Like, it's never that situation where he's wrong because he's not wrong. At that point, he's 50% correct. And the point that I'm trying to convey is that we have to deal with that uncertainty. That's what I was trying to say earlier. It's okay to act on uncertainty because we can't. It's like almost like that sounds almost like quantum mechanics.
I understand what you're saying.
You get the point, though, right? Yeah,
I get the point, and ultimately, just my final thing that I'm saying is that there's a lot of uncertainty here. There's no way to be certain, and if you're the one who is accusing someone, you must consider the alternative scenario of this situation and how it looks and what the downstream consequences might be, because they may be worse, and the situation may look a lot worse than you imagine it looking in your head in this moment.
To your point, I think you're right. To your point, even if we replace reality with a 50-50 alternative, the 50% innocent of that alternative has exactly the type of value that you're talking about. So you have to let it weigh in your action. So a 50-50 guilty person, so a 50% guilty person still is 50% innocent. So that 50% should have the type of value that you're talking about.
Right, exactly.
So, and similarly, a 90% guilty person only gets that 10%. So like, it should be discounted by a factor of 5 comparatively. So of course, comparatively, right? Of course, I mean, it's not like we can do long division and do like extra hard calculations. But the point is, no, I mean, this is, you see, that's why I like this, because it illustrates all the holes in our society in a very beautiful way, which you can let us think about those things. What would be a good way to deal with these situations, right? Maybe it's not about black and white, because that black and white, we cannot see it, but we still have to act. How do we act? And you say, listen, but maybe, Duncan, and this is your point, and it's a very good point, not all 50s are created equal. The innocent 50 is potentially far more important than the guilty 50, perhaps, because that innocent 50, you can destroy that person. So you gotta weigh it potentially more heavily. And again, I'm like,
No, you're right.
I'm thinking like, right out loud. So we gotta think all of it. So perhaps maybe we cannot go into the 100% territory, but we should have to weigh all those things. And I think that's an excellent point. And remember, like, the value of the human value, you know, like how important the human value is. You know, we can't just like discard it.
Yeah, I think it's ultimately the most important thing.
Right.
But all right, we hit all the points. We've gone for longest philosophical Friday of all time. We've introduced audio clips and evidence. We've talked in depth about everything. It's been a wild ride.
Absolutely.
And yeah, let's hope that just nobody ever does anything dumb on stream again. The rest of my life.
or let's hope at least we'll learn something if they do it again. Where can they find us? Where people can find us?
You can find us on YouTube, Why Alex Beats Bobby, greatnessvillage.com, Chasing Poker Greatness, the Philosophical Friday discussion channel. You can tag at Duncan, at Brad, chasingpokergreatness.com. I think we've got the Philosophical Friday part of the website built out, so you can head there as well. And yeah, as always, you can like, subscribe, comment, and we'll be coming at you next week with a brand new episode.
Absolutely.